A very warm welcome to all of you. I'm Anita Potumkulam. I work as a Director Culture at Dakshinachitra, and we are absolutely delighted to present the 5th edition of Langfest, which is really a festival of arts and ideas. And we're so excited that so many young people from various disciplines, from art to design, to visual communication, to media, you've all come. So Dakshinachitra is a 28-year-old museum. We are what we say a culture nature museum. We are spread over 10 acres, and we have different streams within the museum itself. We are a museum of regional architecture. We have a strong focus on folk and craft. We have 2 contemporary art galleries. And we also now have energized festivals like this because we think that it becomes very important for us as a museum to think about knowledge making and to think about how relevant can we become to the next generation of humanist scholars, people who are culturally curious. And this is how we are thinking, envisaging and thinking of a festival like Langfest. The theme this time we thought is art, artists and language. And we define language in the broadest of terms, and we have a wonderful array of speakers from Delhi. We have our first international delegate coming in from Kathmandu. So we have a wonderful array of speakers who are going to debate, interrogate, shine light on a range of issues that tomorrow, as all of you as young, creative workforce are going to have to grapple with at some stage or the other. So think of Dakshinachitra as a place where you can sort of enrich yourself, learn something a little bit more from outside the walls of your colleges, and feel free to visit us anytime. We have wonderful exhibitions happening, we have walkthroughs, we have arranged, and we're going to be doing many more of these things because we are completely, totally dedicated to creating and strengthening the creative workforce of this region. So it gives me great pleasure to invite all our speakers. We first have, the first session is Ram Rahman in conversation with R V Ramani. The format will be Mr. Rahman will give a short presentation followed by the conversation, and we'll have about 10 minutes for Q&A. So that's the format. I invite Shri to now introduce Mr. Ram Rahman.
Ram Rahman is an Indian photographer, artist, curator, designer, and activist based in Delhi. He was born in 1955 to Indrani Rahman, and classical Indian dancer, and Habib Rahman, a noted Indian architect. He initially studied physics at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology and later completed a degree in graphic design from Yale University School of Art in 1979. He is one of the founding members of the Safdar Hashmi Memorial Trust in New Delhi, a leader in the resistance to communal and sectarian forces in India through its public cultural action. Rahman is known for his street photographs of India and his environmental portraits. He has exhibited a number of his works in both solo and group shows. And has curated several exhibitions. He has also published one book, Bioscope, Scenes from an Eventful Life, with Peter Nagy. Thank you. Now I request Krishnapriya to introduce R V Ramani.
R V Ramani, 1957 born, is a graduate in physics from Bombay University. In his college days, his passion for photography made him take up photojournalism as his full-time profession. Working in Bombay, his photographs and photo features has been published in magazines, books, newspapers. After an assignment for still photography for an event avant-garde Hindi feature film, Pehle Adhyay, based on a story by C.S. Lakshmi, directed by Vishnu Mathur, which had cinematography by Navro's contractor. Ramani decided to study at the Film and TV Institute of India, Pune, graduating in 1985 with specialization in motion picture photography. Since then, he has been a cinematographer collaborating with many directors. From 1919, he also started making his own independent documentaries and short films as avant-garde experimentation. He considers all his films as exploration into various facets of expression. For him, the only issue is the need to express and to reach an expression. With more than 30 independent films to his credit, he has established a very unique impressionist free-flowing style of his own. His films and retrospectives have been presented in many forums. Ramani also conducted filmmaking workshops at various film schools in India. He lives at and works from Chennai.
Well, first, thanks to Dakshinachitra. This is the first time I'm coming to see this amazing site, which I have heard about for many years. Thanks for inviting me to the Langfest. Thank you, Anita. The only problem is she's given me 20 minutes for a presentation of a lifetime. And I'm very famous for doing lectures which are 3 hours long, at least. 20 minutes is very, very tight, but I shall try. I have my big clock over here. So I'm also very, very happy to see a lot of young students. And I hope that English is going to be suitable and clear. Anita told me the subject, which is art, language, and artists. And I've tried to create a narrative, really, which I'll go through very quickly. And that's me at the younger time, and me slightly older. The camera I'm using there is it's a film camera, but it was a medium format camera with a large negative. A lot of the pictures I show you were shot with a large black and white negative, later on with digital color. What I thought I would do is give you a little bit of a background from where I come from, both culturally and politically, because I find that having an idea of one's personal history is very important, and how does it affect what you create later in life, especially as a creative person, whether you're a dancer or a visual artist or a filmmaker or an architect. So I'm going to start with a bit of roots quickly. That is my American grandmother, who was from Minneapolis. Her name was Esther Luella Sherman. She was a sort of maverick dancer in the early part of the last century. This is the kind of dancing she was doing. She met and fell in love with an Indian revolutionary who had to escape British India and was in exile into the US, could never come back to British India until independence. His name was Ramlal Bajpai, after whom I'm named. That's her on the left in Minneapolis. She runs away with Harindranath Chattopadhyay to India in 1929, 1930, and through a friend in Bangalore, G. Venkatachalam, who's a very important cultural figure at that time, she goes to the Kerala Kalamandalam to study Kathakali. She was the first woman to be taught Kathakali, and she was able to do that under Vallathol, the poet who had started the Kalamandalam, because she was outside all the caste strictures. As a foreigner, she didn't fall into any of their rigid caste structures at that time. So that's her as Kali, but an amazing transformation. That is her touring India with Gopinath, who got known as Guru Gopinath. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and forth with the history and show how it connects to my own journey. This was many, many years later in Kerala, where I found Guru Gopinath I was having tea at a tea stall, and discovered he was in a building next to me being felicitated. So I ran on the stage, introduced myself, met him after many years, and made these photographs of him and his wife in Kerala. So these histories go back and forth in my life. That's my mother, who meets my father in New York in the mid-1940s. She's 15 years old, he's 30 years old. She runs away from high school and marries him. My sister was born when she was 16 in Calcutta. So it's just, now my mother then becomes a serious dancer, comes to Tanjore, and here you see photographs of her with the great Guru Meenakshi Sundaram Pillai from the Tanjore Bharatanatyam heritage, and on the right with the Guru Chokalingam Pillai. So she becomes a very serious classical dancer, and my father studied modern architecture in the US and comes back to do architecture initially in Calcutta. That's her on the left, photographed by my father, and that's my father on the right, in his studio in Calcutta, building modern buildings for the new India, which has just become independent. The first memorial to Gandhi was built by him in Barakpur in Calcutta, 1949. Gandhiji is assassinated in 1948. 1 year later, this first memorial is built. It is inaugurated by Jawaharlal Nehru, who will figure quite strongly in my narrative. Nehru brings my father to Delhi. Newly independent, he said that we need people like you because we have a lot of building to do for the new India. My mother dances in Madras. This is the museum theater, and you see the poster on the right. This is from 1950. Ragini Devi was what my grandmother became after Esther Luella Sherman. She had become a very famous dancer herself in the South. Very few people knew she was American. So here you see Ragini Devi's daughter, Indrani, being presented. These are the buildings my father is doing in Delhi. These are the University Grants Commission and the Income Tax Office. These are all the basic structure for the new India being built. They were built in this very modernist style language when we had very little money, and actually building material was quite difficult to access at the time. But these were the sort of institutions that built the new democratic modern India, very much under the inspiration of Nehru. On the left is Maulana Azad's tomb in Delhi, done by my father. On the right is with President Rajendra Prasad, the post office building. These are income tax offices designed in Delhi, built all over India. These are the central tax offices, including the one in Madras, which is still there. That's my father with Nehru. Now, I do want to tell you that Nehru was an almost godlike figure for my parents. They come to Delhi at the time when the new India is being formed. This is his design for Rabindra Bhavan. That's the earlier pictures, him showing Nehru the plans for the Rabindra Bhavan, which was built, the gallery, which has been used by artists for many decades in India. And that's my mother with Nehru and Roshan Vajifdar, another great dancer. And next to Nehru is the great Yamini Krishnamurti, one of the great products of Madras, Chennai, Kalakshetra. Next to her is her sister, Jyotishmati. So both my parents were very linked to Nehru personally, and also to that era when the new India is being formed, secular, great hope in the country for where we are going with a modern culture, including a revival of classical dance. That was actually part of our modernism, and music. I'll take off from this photograph because at that time, in the mid-50s, I'm born in 1955, as you were just told. So I'm going to be 70 in a few months. On the left, this is a photograph taken by my father. On the left is Inder Gujral, who became Prime Minister for a few months at much later stage. Then my mother with me. I'm about, I think, 2.5 or 3 years old there. Next to her is the artist Satish Gujral. Next to him is M.F. Hussain, the artist. And next to him is Charles Fabry, who was a very major critic and important cultural figure in Delhi at that time. Now, I'm linking myself to these histories because you see at this time, all the artists, musicians, dancers, architects, all knew each other. Delhi was a small town. Everyone was gathering in Delhi. This whole new culture was being made, was being formed. They all knew each other. Hussain was living in our house and was introduced to Gujral by my parents. Now I'm connecting many years later. This is my photograph of Inder Gujral campaigning in Jalandhar for the first time. I think it was the late 86 election, or for the first time that he ran for parliament. What happened with me, I had gone to study physics like our other guest this afternoon, this morning, and I started doing photography at MIT. I got waylaid because there was an excellent photography department. These pictures I was making, on my own. I was not a photojournalist. I was not doing this for somebody. I just was making pictures of the life around me and the people that I knew, some of whom I had known, or rather they had known from the time that I was born, but I also became friends with them. So these pictures that I'm showing you ended up being a document of a time period which includes politics and culture and ordinary life. So this is Inder Gujral from that photograph. This is Satish Gujral, many years later with his wife Kiran Gujral in the back, Krishan Khanna in the front, and on the right, Mrinalini Mukherjee, the great sculptor. Of them, sadly, only Krishan Khanna is still alive and is about to be 100 years old, I think, this year. And that is M.F. Hussain, my picture of him in Delhi, painting a horse, which is slightly a pun on his own paintings. Oh, this is a large file. It's taking a while. It's got stuck. Okay. Dance history, that is my mother, Ragini Devi, my grandmother, and Ram Gopal, who has a great history in South India also as a dancer, together in New York. And this is the last performance, not shot by me, but that's me on the stage, my mother, grandmother, and sister in New York, 1979. I was very interested in the street in India because I found that the kind of visual imagery that was randomly created for me was actually much more interesting than much of the art. And there were wondrous things to find on the street. This was Hyderabad. A lot of my pictures have a bit of humor. Some of them relate to political issues, other cultural issues. That's Delhi and that's Kerala on the right. On the right is a photograph made after the demolition of the Babri Masjid in 1992, and that's in front of the Red Fort in Delhi. My world revolved around many, many artists. So here you have Vivan Sundaram on the right, and on the left his sister Navina Sundaram, under the portrait, self-portrait made by Amrita Shergill. And I put Navina there because she was strikingly like her aunt, Amrita Shergill. On the left is Paramjeet Singh, Neelima Sheikh, and Shamshad Hussain in Vivan's house. And on the right is Charles Correa and Monica Correa. That was my architecture connection. This is Mario Miranda, the great Goan cartoonist and artist, with Charles Correa in Goa. So this is part of that whole personal connection of mine. And I was also working for Charles, photographing his buildings. Souza, Francis Souza in New York. And on the right is Bhupen Khakkar, the late artist, both of them no longer with us. Bhupen, of course, sitting in the lap, I would say, of Gandhi. And over here in Cholamandal is Vishwa and Nadine. Bala Saraswati, the great, great, great dancer, her daughter Lakshmi, and her son Aniruddha. Shubha Mudgal, who's singing for an ailing Kaifi Azmi on the bed. Shabana Azmi sitting on the floor with her father, Kaifi, in the wheelchair. Ali Sardar Jafri. These are all the great poets who came out of the Communist Progressive Writers Association from the 1940s. These are all histories that you should know of and investigate. Personal connections with politicians. Because of my situation in Delhi, I had both insider and outsider view. This is Ram Vilas Paswan in his own house. I had become quite close to him until he allied with the BJP. The interesting thing is that there were only photographs of himself in his house, not even his wife or his son. On the left is Sitaram Yechuri and Manmohan Singh. And on the right, Ram Vilas on the podium with the first appearance of Phulan Devi, the great so-called bandit queen, whom I had got to know quite well through him. Dinner party in Delhi with the KP Unnikrishnan. On the far right, on the couch, is Naveen Patnaik when he was a socialite. How many minutes do I have? Hold it up. 5, okay. And on the bottom with the bald head is Jairam Ramesh, whom you probably see every day now as Congress spokesperson. This was a funeral of Safdar Hashmi, who was a very dear friend of mine, who was murdered during a street performance in Delhi in 1989. And I got very involved in setting up the Safdar Hashmi Trust in his memory, which has basically been a collection of artists, writers, theater people, musicians, you name it, who have been using their creative force against communal politics and also to fight for freedom of expression over many years. So through this association, I got to know some of the greatest historians, social scientists in India. Here you have Professor Romila Thapar, Irfan Habib, Bipin Chandra, Sitaram Yechuri himself. And the SAHMAT events gave an opportunity for something like this, which is T.M. Krishna meeting the social activist Swami Agnivesh. So there's very interesting interactions that happened. This is Zakia Jafri, the survivor of the Gujarat riots in 2002, who sadly passed away about 2 weeks ago. And she fought for justice until the end, which sadly she didn't get. And this was a recent picture of Sitaram, Sohail Hashmi, Shubha Mudgal, again in a SAHMAT interaction. And since this is a literary language event, I thought I'd show these two books, which I just did. One on the left, this was after the tragic death of Sitaram, in his memory. The book on the left, I've designed both these covers. And on the book on the left, I've actually done an introduction on his great connection to the cultural community in India. So it's a huge loss. Exhibitions done at SAHMAT, which are both conceived, designed, done in a very informal manner. This was after the Babri Masjid demolition. We did this in 1993. posters that I've designed using some of my photographs. So this is a way of some of my images coming out in the public through means like this. I've been photographing the farmer struggles in India, in Delhi, for many years. These are Tamil farmers who had brought skulls of fellow farmers who had committed suicide. I'll be just 2 minutes. And posters, again done for SAHMAT, we use some of these imagery, give a whole history of farmer struggles. Recent pictures of the farmers' 1 year struggle outside Delhi against the farm laws which had to be rescinded. But amazing thing to see how these people lived on that street for 1 year. Pictures, a little unusual for me. These were done the 1984 riots in Delhi. I happened to be there after Indira Gandhi had been assassinated. These have become iconic images of that time. Very few pictures survive. These are, of course, the survivors. And on the right, book has just come out, another way of using my imagery in the public sphere. These are documentations of the anti-CAA movement, Shaheen Bagh movement in Delhi. And this amazing street art which was done by students from the Jamia art faculty and Jamia students. And it was amazing to see just the quality of what they did on the streets. And also, you know, astounding to see young burqa-clad women climbing on these ladders and painting. This was a way of their expression resisting these laws. And more recently, the kind of photographs that I've been assembling, this is looking at what is happening with the destruction of modern architecture in Delhi, particularly under the Modi government. But I'm doing this, this was also shown in the Chennai Photo Biennale a few years ago, which is a mix of images, posters, texts. So not photographs just shown as simple photographs in an exhibition context. This was the Chennai Photo Biennale. And I'm going to end with that and give you hope that you've got some idea of the kind of interaction that I do with visual language and using my photography in the way that I engage in the public. Thank you. Is that on time? I hope that was not boring. So please give me a reaction. Was it something interesting or not? Because you see, speaking a little bit on a personal level is very difficult. Lecturing on some subject which is not very personal is much easier. So I'm always unaware of how people respond. Thanks.
No, the reason why I'm here, I mean, is basically because I found a few common elements with him. One is that the name, my name, Ram, and Ram is here, and money, man, you know. So he also got a man. Then jo reh gaya, what is left, reh, is I, you know. So I thought of this, the possibility, so I told Anita, yeah, there's some common element, let's come in. But also, we both of us have taken to photography at the same time, around the same time.
Yeah, doing physics and then photography, that's another amazing thing.
Some strange kind of a thing. And then, of course, you have a different trajectory and I find it different. I just briefly read some of your works and saw through your works. What struck me straight away is your connection with Hussein, M.F. Hussein. Because you've seen him as a child and he's in your house, he's your family friend. And then you have grown up and you've been seeing him. And you know, that entire chronicle of being with him as a child and also as a grown-up person, photographing him. That photograph of the White Horse is quite fantastic image. You know,
Thank
it's
you.
almost like a canvas in the front and there's an image happening on the back side.
I know.
And it's like a very beautiful image using flash photography.
That's right.
Bouncing
that's right.
off the white horse. You know, I think it was a fantastic image. So I would straight away go to that point of your connection with M.F. Hussain and what kind of anguish, I really was feeling, what kind of anguish you must have gone through when Hussain had to be, relocated into, another
Dubai,
outside
yeah.
Dubai. So I'm saying, maybe you can talk about Hussain.
Yeah, Hussain, I think, is, as Mani said, there's a very long connection, as you saw, from childhood. In fact, there's some more embarrassing pictures with him, where I'm not fully dressed, but really as a baby. But no, you see, Hussain, in my understanding, and I saw him last in Doha just a few months before he passed away in London. I think he came from a very humble background. His father, he was brought up by his grandfather in Pandharpur in Maharashtra, and his grandfather had a small shop repairing hurricane lanterns. And in New York, by sheer chance, I happened to mention that I had met Johnny Walker, the actor, along with Dilip Kumar. They had come actually to a SAHMAT protest in Lucknow. And Hussain suddenly perked up and said that the shop next to his grandfather's shop was Johnny Walker's father's shop. I think Johnny Walker's real name was Badruddin Qazi, if I remember correctly. And Johnny Walker's father had wanted Hussain to marry his daughter, which didn't happen. Now, this was something that even Raisa, who's Hussein's daughter, none of the family had ever heard. And Raisa happened to be there at the time. And Hussain refused because he was madly in love with another woman who came from a higher economic background than him, who didn't marry him. Anyway, the thing with Hussain is this background of his. He comes to Bombay, he lives on the footpath, he starts making a living by painting cinema hoardings. But he was an amazing man because, he had a sort of native intellect. He learned English slowly. He had gone to a madrasa. He had got religious training. He had, learned how to recite the Quran, etc. But he was somebody who was completely modern in his outlook. And for me, he really symbolized partly what I talked about was that, the Nehruvian India. Hussain is a key figure artistically of that trajectory of our history. And he always painted the common man. And my reading of Hussain is that you can't look at Hussain as a gallery artist. I really see Hussain as a folk artist, like a pud painter, like some of the artists who are out here in the shops, outside selling their artwork. I see him as somebody who was so interested in narrative. Sometimes he would very quickly sketch a cricketer, a politician, Leonardo da Vinci. His mind went everywhere. So he's really like a modern chitrakar, pud painter, performer. And if you see his film, which he did in the 60s, Through the Eyes of a Painter, which was in Rajasthan, he very squarely puts himself in that position. So I see Hussain really very unusual because even now amongst artists, you very rarely see somebody who's painting. Sudhir Patwardhan, of course, paints the working class, urban working class, constantly in Bombay. But very few other artists now connect to that ordinary Indian, the ordinary villager, and I think he was also very interested in mythology, and this accusation that he painted obscene pictures is completely nonsense. There is nothing obscene in the work that he did on Saraswati or any of the goddesses. He's painted histories of Jainism, Buddhism, Hinduism, Islam, Christianity, and he really embodied that coming together of all those religions, even though he was a deeply religious person himself. And I've seen him get up early in the morning and do namaz while I'm lying on the couch, in his house in Dubai. But tragically, he was attacked because he was a Muslim by the Hindu right and chased out of India, which is a terrible, terrible part of our history. In a sense, what I talked about Safdar Hashmi's killing in 1989 is a similar kind of event, of a cultural assault, which has changed our country. And I think that exile of Hussein was a terrible, terrible thing which we will never recover from.
Your own experiences, which kind of leads you to be a kind of fond member of SAHMAT, one is of course the killing of Hashmi, and also your experiences of, unfortunately, in the situation where the riots are happening, and then you have to respond to that also, and that you get hurt. You get emotionally disturbed, and the Sikh riots in 1984. And then the later Gujarat riots. And so, as a photographer, one is, of course, to respond immediately that something is happening in front of you, and then you take a picture. I saw those pictures of yours. And what happens to you as an image maker? Like, for example, one is you say that you have to respond and take an image. And then that evidence of that photograph, what were the inquiries that was happening in you when you take a picture of violence, for example? Because violence also, image of violence also creates a certain kind of fear. Yeah. And how do you deal with that, and how do you respond to that?
Well, I have never actually shot violence in process, like some photojournalists have. The Sikh pictures that I did were after the violence was over, and we had gone with relief supplies actually to an area across Delhi. You know what happened in 1984, because I find that a lot of young people don't know these histories. When Indira Gandhi was assassinated by her Sikh guards, there was a terrific attack on the Sikh community all over North India in response to that. And it was partly, people say, in collusion by some figures in the Congress party, etc. Cases have been going on for many years. But those photographs I made, for me, was very unusual, because I wasn't a photojournalist. I happened to be there. I had a camera. I had 3 rolls of film. And I realized that it was important to document that moment and those people. And there was one photograph, which I didn't show, because this was too brief, of a young woman holding the finger of her husband in her hand, which he had in a piece of cloth. And the reason was, most of the men in that gully we went to had been killed, except for one who was in that photograph and on that book cover, who had cut his hair to escape being identified. She was holding her husband's finger because he was burnt alive in the gully outside with car tires, but his finger was cut to remove his gold ring. The gold ring was stolen. Now that, I wrote down the name of the man who was killed. I didn't write down her name. Many years later, 30 years later, that photograph was shown outside a Gurdwara in Delhi as a commemoration of what had happened. And that woman came to the Gurdwara and said, "That is my photograph." And that report came out in the Hindu in Delhi. And after 30 years, I learned the name of that woman. You see, now, regarding Gujarat, we had worked with Teesta Setalwad again after the violence, when we brought victims to Delhi under very dire circumstances, because we were afraid that they would be attacked. We brought them to Delhi to actually meet the press, to meet artists, to meet ordinary people and relate what had happened to them. And the violence was still happening in Gujarat at that time. So then I thought, what can I do as a photographer? So I made portraits. I just made simple portraits of these people, straight portraits against a plain background, not knowing what I would do with them. But I thought, okay, at least let me do this. Took down their names, what they were doing. Some of them were people who were fighting for relief. Zakia Jafri, who saw her husband chopped. He was a very senior politician in Ahmedabad, Congress politician. His hands and his feet were chopped off alive when she was looking from the upper floor, and then he was burnt. So many years later, what happened is I made small images of those portraits, and we hung them in the Gulbarg Society ruins in Ahmedabad, in the houses where people had been killed and the houses had been set on fire. So they were just put up as a memorial, and also to state that, these are the survivors. These are the people who were not wiped out in that killing. So it was, for me, it was a way of making a statement, and it's actually one of the exhibitions I feel most strongly about. So it's, different ways of using this kind of documentary evidence, sometimes in books, and as I said, sometimes in posters or sometimes on the street, and also on the internet now.
You've also done a lot of work with other photographers. You worked on a book, 2 books. You worked on two photographers you seem to be fond of, and also you've also associated with other artists. Like one is Gulam's work you've seen. Now, what is it that you connect with them in those kind of associations?
Well, I've curated actually very big, major exhibitions of senior photographers, and that came out of my experience in the US when I was studying at MIT. I was for the first time exposed to photography history. No one had ever talked to me about photography history. And that, of course, was American and European, British photography history. But I got fascinated, and I realized that many of these photographers who I knew as a child, who were photographing either my father or my mother, they were all amazing photographers and had done amazing bodies of work, but no one now in my generation was aware, because we didn't have books. The ones that were printed in newspapers, the newspapers vanished. There was no record of the work of these people. So I did a very major show of Shunil Jana, who was a member of the Communist Party in the 1940s, did incredible work, the last decade of the freedom struggle, and he was an insider in politics. He was not a photojournalist from outside, so his pictures are incredible of that whole generation of freedom fighters. With the communists were associated the Progressive Writers Association, IPTA, the Theatre Association. So he had these portraits of writers, performers, many of whom ended up forming the key backbone of the Bombay film industry after independence. Almost that entire first generation of the Hindustani film stars came out of IPTA. So I did, and the reason I did this was that, one, I was able to see the work, and because of the personal connection, he allowed me to do it. I've done one book of his. I'm still trying to get his archive back to India, which is sitting with his son in Berkeley, in California. But it is an epic of our freedom struggle and the first decade of the new India. There is no novel, no film to match what this man has done with his visual document. And hopefully you'll all see that someday, hopefully soon. Madan Mahata was an architectural photographer of absolutely the first rate, internationally on any level. And he managed to photograph all the modern architecture that was being built, as I said, in that post-Nehruvian era in Delhi, of which the body of work done by these architects from my father's generation to 2 generations afterwards was absolutely incredible, very first-rate, idealistic. Did a big exhibition of his work, again, because I felt it was important to share. And that's why I gave you a little bit of my history, because I think history and knowing your own history And also the history of the medium that you're involved in is very important because it gives you a background, to figure out your own practice of where somebody has done something. You can get inspired by it and maybe not repeat it because it has been done, but do it in a different way. So part of the reason is, connecting with that history.
One is, I read, I don't know whether you said it or somebody else, whether you said it or somebody else said it. I just noted down, a work of art is essentially a political object. I don't know why you said it. You said
well, I think that's been said by
another thing is that when I was asking this question earlier about how you, what happens in photography itself when you're doing this kind of work, the process as a politics, which is what I address in my work, not so much the end result, but the process as a politics. But I was wondering whether for you also, when you say, when you say that you exhibited your works in that area where the riots have happened, do you think that art, a project of an art or a political art, what you call as political art as politics, is in the way it is processed and displayed or presented, or in the way it is taken?
Well, I think it's a dual thing. You see, yes, all art is political because everybody is a political being also. That is part of, you have grown up in a society and you are part of that society. That society has framed you. A bit like what I showed, that history of my family framed me. And that is where I have come from. I think, you see, in the Safdar Hashmi Trust, our thing has been, we have a performance platform where somebody who, T.M. Krishna, of course, is a very consciously political artist in his work. And so is Shubha Mudgal in a way, because she will make compositions or pick up poems or text related to some subject that you're doing, if it is a commemoration of Gandhi or if it is on, secular issues. But other artists who are, Hari Prasad Chaurasia, etc., they perform what they perform. But the point is they perform on this platform which has a political basis. So it's not that their art is political in its content, but by their presence, by being on this platform, they are making a political statement. So it could be, like Palaniappan, who's sitting here, whose art can be quite abstract and, conceptually complicated. His work on a platform like this would be him making a statement that, yes, I agree with the stand that you are taking. It doesn't mean that your work has to be overtly political. And, the portraits that I did of those victims were not political in their content. It just happened to be that these people were the survivors. And putting it in that context makes a different kind of statement, but I don't know if you can say that the image itself has a political angle. So I think it's how you can use visual language, in this case photography, in a context which may make a statement.
One of the reason also is there is this Vivan Sundaram, another artist, who is also part of SAHMAT, who is one of the founding members. He has worked with one of the elements of photography in one of his exhibits, where he has used a photograph of photographer Oshi Jal, of a Hindu-Muslim riot in Mumbai. Okay, and there is a situation where somebody is killed on the road, and there is a nice image, which is a very iconic picture of Oshi Jal, photographer. Yeah. And that image, he used it as an art installation for himself in his own work, where he kind of retexturizes the whole print and forms it in a very different kind of textures, and sometimes and then you present it, and when I saw it became very emotional for me. Okay. And which I might not have reacted so strongly to Oshijal's first image, though that image also is a very powerful image. But this one creates a different deflective or a more refractive image, which can associate with self-reflection and various other possibilities. While a direct image of a violence sometimes can take you in a wrong direction also, and then it can create fear in you. For one of the images, I was also was wondering during this, it is relevant in this place, is the Sri Lankan, Tamil Sri Lankan dispute, where the final stages of the war, there was a lot of violence happened in the Tamil Tigers.
Yeah, terrible.
And there were these images taken by the soldiers of the victims whom they kind of did violence against.
Yeah.
The photographs of by the soldiers came out on the media, released after many months, and that became the biggest kind of a rallying point to speak about the entire argument about violence has happened, there should be justice, and the inquiry has to happen and all that. So I was all the time arguing that we are buying an image with a certain perspective, where the victor is saying we did it, and we are buying that image, and then we cannot argue on that image.
Yeah.
So it has to be processed, and it has to be seen in a different way.
Well, I think is, that is a way of, you have to bring your own understanding of politics and history into reading images like that. The kind of thing you're talking about, you're seeing on a huge scale done by Israeli soldiers in Gaza. And there are videos on the net, some of which are absolutely horrifying. And at least internationally, there's a group now who's identifying those soldiers who have made those videos and who are putting it out on the net. And they have sent this to the International Criminal Court. And those soldiers, one of whom had to flee from Bombay recently, what they're doing is they're identifying these people when they're traveling around the world and asking the local governments to arrest them. So this is a different use. One thing very quickly, the SAHMAT book, can you just bring that? I'll just... This is was brought to me from the library upstairs here. This is in Dakshinachitra. This was done, exhibition that I did now a number of years ago in the US, traveled. And it's an amazing document. And that photograph that you're talking about of Hoshijal and the sculpture of Ivan is in this book. And all of you students, please come and use the library here, especially since this book, which is now signed by me, is also there. So this is an incredible resource for any of you who are interested in art and activism. Please do. And there are excellent essays here also, which give a background to much of what we were discussing just now.
We are ending our session. Now maybe it's open for questions.
Hi sir, I'm Dhanush I'm studying communication design. So I'm just curious, when do you make a decision and when do you make a choice to take a photo? You guys are deciding, but I still feel like I need some clarity in that, because it also helps me in observing things and making the choice.
Gosh, that's actually, when I'm a visual person, so when I'm like many of these photographs you've seen have been in a social milieu that I'm in, or in some maybe political meeting or something, and I'm taking those pictures really as a document. There's, okay, these artist friends are sitting there. But on the other hand, when you see a photograph like that one of the Hanuman in front of the Red Fort, now that very clearly I saw immediately, this was after the demolition of the Babri Masjid in Ayodhya. And to me, those two things connected in my mind when I saw that. I thought, okay, here is Hanuman, who is, on Rama's bow, flying over the Red Fort, which is, Mughal monument. So those connections immediately came into my head. So sometimes that happens. Other times, you'll see something which is humorous. Or I showed you one of the posters from the streets in Delhi with Indira, Ambedkar, all together, So in a sense, when I look at that, I say, oh, this is almost a narrative of our history of a particular kind. And it's on the street. This has not been made by an artist or an intellectual or somebody. It's somebody who's selling these. And I delight in that because I find sometimes these things that you find juxtaposed, you can read something into it which may not have been the intention. That one picture I showed you of Gents Urinal, of that big cutout, you see that was from a circus. Now the man who's putting up those steel barriers, I'm 100% didn't know that Gents Urinal, was written there under that figure. It's a total chance thing. But then I'm walking on the street and I see that and I think, oh, wow, this is so amazing, and I took the photo. The victims of 1984 was very different. That emotion is, I saw what had happened to these people, and I thought, okay, it's important that I record this visually for the future. At that time, I didn't know what I would do with them. But they have ended up being the iconic pictures. They've been used in documentaries, even by Amir Khan, etc. Those photographs have become sort of iconic. And I give them away for free because I said, just use them. It's not a thing that I need. That in fact, one gets embarrassed if someone says that they want to pay for this. So it's really, it's your own sensibility which you should use. I will talk about one photograph which I made last night here, which was quite humorous, which if you go to my Facebook page, a lot of my stuff is on Facebook, by the way. It's become my kind of archive. It was a picture here, 4 signs. The top one says toilet. The middle says Kerala left, Tamil Nadu left, and canteen right. So I posted that and I said that I'm in a terrible dilemma because I can't decide.
Thank you for sharing that. I was wondering if you could reflect on 2 things about monochrome or black and white photography. What do you think will be the future of monochrome photography in India? And what do you hope will be the future?
Well, that's a very interesting question because the earlier work that you saw was all in black and white. Later work done with the digital camera and now with the iPhones, very often the way I use black and white, what I found wonderful about black and white is it flattens the image. So it reduces the seduction of a bright color. I was thinking of that picture of T.M. Krishna and Swami Agnivesh, which is very colorful, and I switched it to black and white. And then I thought, with Agnivesh's saffron, etc., it was important to keep the color in that. But I use black and white to, in a sense, abstract an image. And I find with the kinds of image I like making, which is on the street, where I juxtapose things in the front, in the back, on the side, the black and white condenses all of that to make it readable on an equal level. What happens with color is color has a dimensional aspect. Some colors pop out, some colors recede. So the image, unless you're very consciously using color, a lot of my pictures are not using color consciously. They're documents like Zakia Jafri. I have used that in black and white. The person, well, there are many people. The person in India who used color very consciously was Raghuveer Singh. And I thought I had a picture of Raghuveer in my presentation, but I didn't. He was a photographer I was very close to. And he and I had running debates. He would say that, why are you only photographing black and white? I mean, this country is all about color. You know, and I even shot with him, gone to the Kumbh Mela, etc. But his work was all in color, but he was very conscious of how he used color in the frame. So that's a very different, and he was one of the rare photographers who was, you know, highly conscious of the color construction and how it related actually to painting. Whether it was contemporary painting or Matisse or Mughal painting or Rajasthani miniatures, he was very conscious of that. Color, actually talking about Hussein, you know, Hussein also was very inspired by miniature painting and this flat color areas which affected his, I mean, it started very early in his work when he saw the first miniatures in the Rashtrapati Bhavan right after independence. So, you know, I still shoot in film, by the way, and I'm processing and printing at home, which I started again during COVID because I was locked up. And I have a small flat, but covered all the big windows with black cloth, and I still make black and white images.
Thank you. So we've run out of time, but both Mr. Ram Rahman and Ramani are here. Should you like to have a one-to-one with him? So thank you. Can we have a round of applause for both of them?